What up? It's your proverbial boy. I'm here in New Orleans, Louisiana. As you can see, the Mardi Gras festivities are upon us. And I just wanted to crack out a little video here, while I'm wandering around. I'm kind of here as sort of a reward for finishing the Charisma Mastery launch. And I just kind of like to take this opportunity to reflect a little bit on the 20-year journey that brought me to this point. When I started out in self-development, I started out in the dating realm. And the reason for that was because I was such a massive failure in that realm that I felt like I had to rectify that. I actually lost my virginity when I was 19 years old in the dormitory at my college. I was, assigned a floor at the dorm, and I met a bunch of friends on that same floor, and among that social circle was a girl, and over a period of months we grew closer together. And then we developed feelings for each other, and then subsequently we had hot virgin on virgin action in my dorm room. And the next semester we then moved in together into an apartment off campus. And then within a couple months, she had been kidnapped by Christian fundamentalists and taken to an inpatient re-education facility, and I never saw her again. True story. Very relatable. I'm sure many of you can relate to this story. But then after that, I got into a relationship with a much older woman that I met at work. And, she was 29, I was 19, 20. And same thing, we grew closer together via work, being, in proximity to one another over time, and ultimately ended up moving in together. Now, that relationship was really interesting because it was very abusive. She abused me, I abused her emotionally, physically, verbally, spiritually, every way you can conceivably imagine, basically. But I stayed with that person for 4 years. Now, why would I stay in a relationship that's debilitating for 4 years? Well, quite frankly, I believe that if I were to break up with her, I probably would not have the ability to find someone equally attractive within a reasonably short time frame, right? I would be cast adrift, up the creek without a paddle once more. And I was probably right, because let's face it, in both of those relationships, I had no agency in selecting that. I wasn't the one that said, let's do this. Basically, I was around them long enough, and they threw out hints that I'd have to be a complete fucking moron to not see until finally I got the picture, and then we hooked up. So I felt I had no choice, and I was trapped in this sort of codependency and scarcity. So after she eventually dumped my ass and moved, I was like, fuck this. I'm gonna get this mastered, right? And so, it was kind of like a threshold had been crossed in my mind, like a switch had been flipped. I had an emotional leverage point, if you will, where, come hell or high water, I was gonna figure this out. I was gonna figure the ins and outs of how to actually meet people and form intimate relationships with them very, very swiftly. And, over the next several years, I actually ended up doing that. Hey! And, but again, it wasn't all like peaches and cream. I had a lot of difficulty along the way. And there were times where I felt like I should probably just like throw in the towel, so to speak. And like I remember one time I had cleaned my room before I went out, because I was like, I'm gonna come home with somebody, it needs to be clean. I cleaned it all up. I even created a sexy time playlist that I downloaded from Kazaa and burned to CD. I'm really dating myself with that one. And then I came home by myself, and I was just like sitting there in this clean room, and the cleanliness is just kind of underlying the failure, right? And I remember sitting there so messed up I couldn't even cry. I was just like, what are you doing, dude? You're not getting better. People are just, you're making a fool of yourself. People are making fun of you. I remember I went to this one place near my house, and I'd go there every week. And one time I heard these two girls, they saw me go by, and they're like, look, it's that guy. He's getting worse every week in terms of like my appearance and my demeanor, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, damn. But I remember thinking in that moment, I was like, okay, yeah, maybe it's not the greatest thing, but at the same time, what's the alternative? Is the alternative just continue being a fucking chode? Like, absolutely not. Like, come hell or high water. Like, if I go down, I'm gonna go down with my fingers white knuckle wrapped around this shit's throat, right? If I go down, I'm taking it with me. I persevered, and here we are today. And now, almost 2 decades later, I've been fortunate to be extremely successful in that realm. And additionally, had many experiences that are typically, very few people are fortunate enough to experience. The kind of stuff that typically is only reserved for possibly some manner of rock musician or something like that. So, and I will cherish those memories for a lifetime. And look, I still continue to have those experiences even as a 44-year-old man. So again, it's really something that I've been able to take with me forever. And subsequently, after developing this, getting that emotional leverage, resolving to do whatever it took in order to be successful, I made it. But then I decided, look, I want to actually share this with others. And in myself and my colleagues, we ended up forming this company. And then over the course of the last 17 years, we developed ways and means to transfer these skills to others. And I've been very, very successful in that arena too. I've done live coachings, like literally where they put you on the spot and say, here, demonstrate this in front of us. And I've done that pretty much every weekend for the past 17 years in over 100 cities and 50 countries around the world. So, I know it works, it gets the results. However, there was also something in my mind, something in my mind that kind of was nagging at me. And it was this. I was very good at teaching technique. I would often give students techniques or various lines or gambits to employ. And, very often they'd be saying the exact same things that I would say, but they weren't getting that same level of interest, that same level of attention, that same level of magnetism or vibe. So it's okay, you can teach someone how to say various lines or various strategies or techniques that you might employ in different, social situations, whether that be closing sales, whether that be, getting intimate with someone they just met, et cetera, et cetera. However, how do you teach someone to vibe, right? And that was kind of something that always stuck in my mind, stuck in my craw, if you will, as kind of a failing on my part, not a failing, but a kind of a hole in my teaching game, so to speak. So I wanted to discover how to teach people how to vibe, and in very specific, descriptive ways, not just be more expressive, this, that, the next thing, because, those vague instructions, they just make the client feel judged, but at the same time, they don't give any clear descriptive means of making the change. So I wanted to get very specific about the way that these criticisms were verbalized in order to make change available to the clients. So I could teach someone how to, quote unquote, create a vibe. This, of course, brings up the very valid question of why is it important to create a so-called vibe, to pass the vibe check, so to speak. Well, and again, that is a very valid question. Why is that something that's important to learn? Well, let's face it, if we're talking about meeting new people, when you first approach someone and speak to them, their initial reaction is almost invariably going to be okay, what? Okay, great, what? Okay, cool, because let's face it, they didn't come up to you, you went up to them. So naturally, they're all right, what do you got? Essentially, you're kind of on stage, and they're all right, what do you got? And if you're unable to hold up your end of the deal, so to speak, and create an initial compelling magnetic vibe, then, basically it's never gonna get off the ground, right? They're just gonna be okay, they're not gonna contribute. So you're not gonna be able to cross what we call the so-called social hook point. Now, what's that mean? Social hook point is where they go from thinking, okay, who is this person and why are they talking to me? And then they make that shift to, okay, this person's cool, I enjoy talking to them. And that can happen instantaneously, or that can take up to a couple of minutes. But until you arrive at that point, the onus is on you to uphold 90% of that interaction. And again, create a good feeling that makes them want to continue to speak with you, right? Very, very, very important, absolutely vital, in fact. And again, so many of my clients I see have an inability to do that, right? So for example, you might have a client who's very, very well versed in technique, but completely at a loss of how to create that sort of compelling magnetic vibe with both their voice, their facial expressions, their gestures, their movement through space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, in developing charisma mastery, I really wanted to, like I said, get down to the nitty-gritty of the science of how to create a so-called vibe. So these guys could actually cross that social hook point and their interactions could actually start to get off the ground. And you probably heard me talk in these videos, over the course of the past couple weeks, about these so-called shut down people who are like a quote unquote piece of furniture. And I also, know a lot of people watching that are probably like, well, that's not me. This sounds great for those people who are that like shut down piece of furniture, but that's not me, thank heavens. But it's great that this is there for them, right? But the thing to understand, it's like 90% of my clients have some form of this. Maybe they're not completely shut down. Maybe they're somewhat okay, somewhat charismatic, but they're just not 100% at their potential. And if you think about it, that's almost worse, right? That's actually almost worse. Why is that? Well, it's simple, because they're not living up to their potential, right? That's again, they're leaving money on the table. They're leaving opportunities on the table that are just within their reach. And if they were just able to cross that threshold and once and for all break free of those judgmental entanglements, break free of those anticipatory entanglements that prevent them from taking action, or not even from taking action, but from fully expressing themselves 100% in interactions. Again, punching through the wall, not punching at the wall. If you punch at the wall, you're just gonna break your hand, right? And yeah, you'll get results, but you're not gonna get anywhere near the results that you could be getting if you just punch through the wall once and for all and achieved your full potential. So just to give you a real world example of this, I live in a big house in San Francisco and I have some roommates. They're young guys and girls, they're just normal dudes. And I was about to go out for a boot camp and my assistant showed up and briefly interacted with these two guys. And as we're leaving, he's like, so those two guys, they seem pretty cool. Do they go out? I was like, nah, they don't really go out. He's like, well, do they, have like the level of social results that we do? I'm like, no, not really. They just mostly hang around and talk about sports, right? In fact, one of the guys, I don't think he's even had any sort of romantic relationship or even like a passing romantic encounter in the entire 3 years that I've known this guy. And they're like, and my assistant was like, why wouldn't he ask you for help? It's like it's as though you're living with essentially the Michael Jordan of teaching this stuff, like one of the best in the world. Yeah, like if I lived with Michael Jordan, I'm not even that interested in basketball, but I would at least ask him maybe to teach me a couple things if he was willing. And to be fair, let's be clear, I'm more than willing to help these people out if they were to ask me, but of course they never will. Why? Because to do so would be to admit where they're not stepping up. And look, they have fine lives, very fulfilling lives, are cool. I enjoy hanging out with these people, but you got to think on some level in the back of their head, they know it's not right. They know that something is fundamentally wrong if they can't go up and meet someone, with relative ease. Like that's a missing part of their life. There's got to be an itch in the back of their head. But the thing is, you got to understand, like I said before, it's very easy to take refuge in that cocoon, that seductive cocoon of mediocrity, right? Because good enough is good enough. It doesn't matter if, if I'm not the best or like even getting extraordinary results, my results are good enough. And then of course the rationalizations come in to again, backwards rationalize and make it seem even more acceptable until you're just stuck in this rut and nothing ever happens. Then you look up and years have passed you by. And now you're like, wow, I want to start, but it seems like it's too late now, et cetera, et cetera. Something I've seen time and time again in clients, who kind of bemoan that they didn't start earlier. And again, this is another one of the reasons why I think that the populace will never rise up against the 1%, the oligarchs who, are counterproductive to our society or what have you. And why is that? Because things are fine, things are good enough. Like they might be bad, rent might be high, but it's good enough. Like, right, good enough is good enough. And like the fact of the matter, it's like you still have your iPhone, you still have your, Postmates, et cetera, and it's not bad enough to take action. So you have to decide for yourself. Are you going to stop accepting mediocrity? Are you going to stop stumbling and bumbling through life and step the fuck up, right? Again, you have to hit that emotional leverage point. For me, I knew at a very young age, because I had, several traumatic experiences with my family, and then these whole like romantic relationship disasters. Like I said, I hit a tipping point where I'm like, I refuse to accept this any longer. And come hell or high water, I'm gonna figure this out no matter what it takes, right? And furthermore, I'm gonna do this in a way where I can live unapologetically and be myself 100% and not have to compromise there either. Now, interestingly enough, I found that in that resolution to not compromise my own beliefs, because all my heroes growing up were like these kind of very like uncompromising, almost counterculture figures, like Hunter S. Thompson, Old Dirty Bastard. These people who succeeded on their own terms. And I was like, I want to be like that. And interestingly enough, I only came to realize much later was that the appeal of those figures was because of that very characteristic, right? That resolve to be themselves 100% of the way and let the chips fall where they may. And I think that's what's so compelling about that is, remember, the number one rule of all social interaction is whatever you feel, they feel. So if you go up and you're free from concern, you're very, again, free from self-judgmental inhibition in a way that most people, frankly, are not. People are gonna get a whiff of that while they're around you and experience that almost vicariously or by proxy, by means of that whatever you feel they feel phenomenon, and subsequently they want to be around it. They're like, maybe if I were to hang out with this person, I could be like that too. So it's all about creating that feel-good vibe that people want to be around. But again, in order to do that, you first have to learn how to express yourself. You have to learn how to create that magnetic vibe. And where does that start? It starts in, again, understanding the system of what's going on inside of you when you're trying to communicate, and then opening up these previously inhibited channels of energy in the face, the voice, the body, that are going to allow you to express yourself 100% and just create that magnetic vibe that people just want to be around. And once you do that, then you can begin executing whatever technique you want, whether it's, again, sales, whether it's getting intimate with someone you just met, yada, yada, yada. Right? But first, you got to have that foundation of that ability to express yourself 100%, that ability to create that vibe that goes along with that, and thereby create that foundation for you to, proceed with any sort of quote unquote horizontal plot development you might want to. Now, if you are one of those people that I'm talking about that's kind of okay, but not living up to your potential, it's like you got to notice it on a certain level, right? You're like, this is fine. But on a certain level, when you're out interacting, you can feel that wall, that kind of judgmental barrier between the intuitive resources and the intellect and the external projective modes that's inhibiting you from being your best. In fact, now that I've mentioned it, you probably won't be able to not notice it when you're out, right? So you got to scratch that itch and step up and start achieving at the full potential. And once you do, and you remove that, that barrier of judgmental inhibition, it's like night and day. It's like a switch is flipped, and all of a sudden you're not just getting like okay rewards. Now you're getting all of the rewards, and that's in business, in your social life, with your family, at work, with your colleagues, with your boss, when you're trying to get investors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and your dating life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, you have to learn how to create that vibe. Now, how do we do that in the Charisma Mastery program? Well, like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. I did a lot of research, but I knew that everything had to be based on that 20 years experience of stuff that I saw in the real world that had practical applicability. Because, a lot of the books that I read about this stuff in my research, most of them, frankly, are very hokey, very surface level, overly academic, where you can tell like it's not super applicable in the real world, especially, to get the kind of results that we're talking about here. So I drew from, neuroscience, cognitive behavioral therapy, obscure acting methods, transcendental approaches, among other things, to arrive at this system that I've developed. And it all starts with, number one, learning how to express yourself and increase the vocabulary of your external projective modes. Then we go up to the internal guidance modes, where we start to investigate how the intellect functions in process as you're interacting with people, how it can help guide decisions, but how it can also inhibit you, and with these interference control patterns that are called up, at the intellect's behest, when you try to, or you have an impulse to express yourself emotionally or express yourself with a greater quantity or quality of emotional energy. right? So understanding that, exercises to work on that, exercises for the inner emotional process and how that interacts with the intellect, exercises to open up to intuitive capacity, exercises for the 6 skills of charismatic communication, which is creating energy, which is concentrating that energy, which is structuring that energy, then imagining, stylizing, and coordinating everything in one coherent, expressive whole, right? So again, it's really a huge weight off my shoulders to be able to release this. I feel like this is the best work of my life thus far. Probably do something better in the future, but as of now, in this, again, 20-year journey of coaching, this is literally the most life-changing thing that I could conceive of that would, again, it also contains an exercise process that puts the power in your hands, right? So you're not relying on this, you're not dependent on this external authority figure of some instructor. Again, it's an exercise process that you can use at your leisure, in order to increase your expressive capacity, your expressive capability, and your communicative power for as long as you want, right? And once you have that power in your hands, everything changes. So launch period is still on until February 29th. And during that period, we have a lot of amazing bonuses that are quite ridiculous if you ask me. First off, I'm giving you a ticket to the Charisma Mastery live event, which is a 2-day event where we actually go through all these exercises in a large group environment. And I feel that, the digital course and the live event, they really do go hand in hand. Because, and by the way, the digital course, it's not just some like information dump. I know a lot of these digital information products, it's like they just like dump a bunch of info, and mind you, this is it's a lot of it's a university level course essentially. Again, based on my 20 years of real world experience. But a lot of these digital courses, they just it's like they dump a bunch of ingredients on a table and they don't give you the recipe of how to make it into an appealing dish. You got to kind of figure it out for yourself. So with the Charisma Mastery digital program, it's actually an 8-week course, and myself and my team are actually giving you 6 months of attention on a actual private internet group where you can get support, you can have all your questions answered about the homework for each module, and you can also network with like-minded individuals. Beyond that, I've got modules from some of my closest colleagues, including Derek, his module was a blast to record. And as you know, if you know Derek, he's a very opinionated individual and he's got a lot to say about this stuff. My buddy Julian, and that module about how trauma and that the process of releasing trauma interacts with these tension entanglements and how, again, these two things are kind of tied together. And I learned a lot from recording that module myself. Got a module with Tyler about high status communication. And additionally, we're gonna be releasing a couple of surprise bonuses near the end of the launch period. And again, that Charisma Mastery live event, that's already a $997 value right there off the bat. It essentially pays for itself. Beyond that, really not supposed to talk about this, but essentially you'll see at the last days of the launch, we're gonna reveal some extra bonuses, and one of them is the opportunity to get to train with me in the field live for 3 days. Again, totally free of charge when you sign up for Charisma Mastery Live right now. Additionally, some other bonuses thrown in there as well. But again, you can only get this bonus package if you sign up before the launch ends on February 29th. This is why, and again, the reason we included these is because I want you to be able to make that mental switch and do this now. Of course, as with all programs that we've done in the past, we do have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So again, I wanted to make this a no-brainer for you. I wanted to remove all intellectual reasons you might have to say no to this. Because look, I know when you see opportunity in front of you, it's here's the keys to the car, you can drive it if you want, but then that's where that weak little voice comes up. Like, nothing's worked in the past before. Oh, it's too much money. Oh, I'm a hard case, this, that, the next thing. Whatever that self-talk might be that tries to talk you out of doing it, of investing in yourself, you gotta shut that off, man. You gotta shut it off, right? Investing in yourself is the best investment you can make. I know it sounds like hyperbole, but it's literally true. I believe it. I walk the walk. I talk the talk, I walk the walk. I spend tens of thousands of dollars each year on self-development courses myself because I know I can't learn it all, right? You have this thing, it's called an ego, and so we struggle with this. But it's like, look, don't be arrogant. Your time is valuable. You don't want to learn this stuff from your brother-in-law if you ever decide to learn it at all. So again, stop wallowing in the mediocrity, step up, click that link below right now, and I'll see you inside Charisma Mastery.
Definitely learned a lot just to be able to connect with people a lot better. Jeffy's really studied down to the roots of how we're so stifled and you have these entanglements inside you and how to release them. I definitely recommend this program for other people to take a deeper look within themselves. Jeffy's program is amazing.
This program is extremely exercise-based. It's designed to give you a process to identify these weaknesses in your communicative system, to open and sustain charismatic expression, charismatic communication with increasing consistency. All sensory communication is based on some relationship of these three perceptual and projective modes. Any art involving human communication is going to benefit from knowing how the communicating power of each mode can be enhanced. Charisma and conversational skill really hasn't had a vocabulary for talking about these issues surrounding the technique. Most of the books you read, the vast majority of them are very surface level, very hokey. And even with experienced teachers, the feedback can often be very subjective and vague. You seem kind of stifled. So I want to change the way that these criticisms or descriptions are verbalized and get very, very specific. So when we're talking about these blockages, we know precisely what we're talking about here.
If you follow the instructions, you see something very net and precise that happens. You're going to see the result instantaneous.
It's the best charisma program I've ever seen.
So I learned something which is very rare.
How do people use their energies when they communicate? How can I help them become masters of those energies? So when you go out and you feel that blockage, that inability to act, oh, there's the person I want to talk to, I know how to go talk to them, I've read the theories, I've watched all the videos, but I can't take action. What's impeding the flow? Remove the obstacles, isolate the skills, exercise them separately, then put them together, back together in a more completely realized whole.
Unleashes your true charisma.
In fact, you have some glimpse of energy you can manage on the wall side. Increase it, decrease it, manage it. Seriously, it was absolutely amazing and astonishing.
How to speak to all the issues surrounding this interrelationship between intuitive and intellectual resources is arguably the most fundamental challenge facing anyone who's attempting to improve their communication skills. So this program intends to prepare your total instrument to open and communicate freely, but also teach you to let go.
He will take you by the hand and guide you step by step with his method that he's been trying and improving, and you're gonna get the results that you wanna be looking for.
Overall, this is a really broad spectrum course in charisma. I think I can apply it in my dating life, also in business and other areas of my life. So if you're looking to develop general charisma that you can apply across all areas of life, definitely check out Jeff's Charisma Mastery.